Hello, hello Debox. Nice to see you, all of you. The size of the room and the number of attendees reminds me the size of the CDI expert group, so I stay in the same schema. So we're going to talk this afternoon about CDI 4, which was released a few weeks ago, and which was part of the Jakarta EE 10 release few weeks ago, and we will see the new stuff that come in the spec and why it's important for Java future, for Jakarta EE future, and for MicroProfile future as well. So let's talk about myself. I'm Antoine Sabot Durand. I'm a Java champion. I used to work for Red Hat, and I was the former CDI spec lead on CDI 1.2 and 2.0. I also worked on the CDI 4 specification with the new expert group and the Eclipse Foundation. But in the last month, I was less active because I took a new job. I'm working at a consulting company in France called Siam. A nice company. So you can follow me on Twitter, or you can follow the CDI spec Twitter handle if you want to be informed of the new feature and activity around CDI. By the way, if you feel like after the talk, if you feel like joining the expert group, feel free to do it. So let's do it very fast. So my company, Siam, is consulting. It's based in France, Paris, on Toulon. We are working only on strategic mission, and we have experts from all over the world, as you can see. And beyond the DIT part of the company, we also work on behavioral science and collective intelligence as well. So a nice project, a nice feature on the company. And if you live in France and want to settle in France, we are hiring. So if you feel like, you can flash this QR code. So enough with advertisement. Let's start with our agenda. So I'll start with a flashback on the CDI history. There are a few steps in the history of CDI can be interesting, so we'll do a focus on that. And after that, we will go into the deep part of our subject, so the new feature in CDI 4. So there are two parts, the minor changes, but it can be interesting because there was some discussion on Twitter about the deprecation and the removal of some API in the CDI specification. Some of the people were not happy with that, but I will go back on that topic. And the fact that CDI, in the end, adopted the JPMS support. So Java 9 is here. Good news. And after that, we'll make a deep dive in CDI Lite and see the new stuff in this part of the spec. And if you have questions at the end, feel free to ask. So let's go back in time. What about the CDI timeline? By the way, who is using CDI in the room? Wow, nice. Okay, so everybody will be aware of what I'm talking. So the first version of CDI was released with Java EE 6 in 2009. And it was a very new feature and a very new way of doing specs, because it was probably the first specs that brings a lot of innovation in the Java EE stacks. Before that, it was very a conservative part, and CDI brought something quite new in the Java EE landscape. There was a bunch of evolution in CDI 1.1. I will list them after that, and CDI 1.2. CDI 2.0 is rather important because it brings. It's important because I led the specification, but beyond that, it's important because it brought the Java EC support. It was a bit late to do that, but anyway. And it's still quite relevant because CDI 3 is not a very big release. This release is mainly due to the move from Java EE to Jakarta EE and the change of the package in the API. And we are here to speak about the last version, CDI 4, that was released in April. And there was a minor release in June or July, I'm not sure, with some correction in the spec documentation. So let's go through that in a speed way. So, as you may know, CDI provide a way to give you stateful object with life cycle. That's the context part, and dependency injection. Dependency injection was it was a new way to do input dependency injection at this time because it was very based on type. It was strong typed dependency injection. Sorry. We had also all the AOP stuff with the interceptor and the decorator in CDI 1.0, and a feature that became very popular among CDI developers was the event notification model. And another stuff that should have been more popular, in my opinion, because it's very well designed and very well thought, but not very well advertised. It's the SPI, allowing to develop portable extension on CDI and integrate third-party frameworks or library. It was used, but a lot of people trying to do that had a hard time to do that. And I think if we achieve to provide more documentation, perhaps the story would have been a bit different. So let's go through rapidly around CDI 1.1 and 1.2. So roughly it's some fix on the specification. There are some addition to the SPI and the API of the spec. We have more information about the event, more metadata about the event, for instance, and the beans. And we also provide in CDI 1.1 and 1.2 a better way to access CDI bin container from outside CDI with a new class called CDI. And also we have a new way to prioritize the interceptor using a new annotation at priority. CDI 2. So it was released, wow, more than 5 years ago. So the main topic about CDI 2 was the introduction, as I said, of a support for Java EC. So at this time, it was possible to start a CDI container from your Java application, from your Java JVM. It was a good stuff, but it was a bit too late because 3 years before that, Spring Boot appeared, and we were too late to provide a viable alternative for that. Nevertheless, it was there. We added enhancement on the event, so asynchronous event. Using this, you could launch event in an asynchronous way. That wasn't the case before, and ordering of the event. We also tried to ease the development of portable extension with the SPI enhancement. So we added a kind of configurator, a kind of builder pattern on the portable extension. It was quite nice, and a lot of people loved that. And we also had AOP enhancement with interceptor on the previous pins. So I didn't list the CDI 3, as I said, because it's mainly a package renaming with the transition to the Eclipse Foundation and Jakarta project. So let's start with the new feature on CDI 4. So the work on CDI 4 started on 2019, roughly, and took 2.5 years with a pandemic in the middle. So it was a bit a rush compared to other version. And a lot of nice features were brought to CDI 4. Most of the ideas that came in CDI 4 were discussed a long time ago regarding having a solution to have a lighter CDI runtime deployment. But we didn't have time and we didn't have proof of concept to say, okay, let's try it, let's go in that direction. The big thing that happened between CDI 2 and CDI 4 that make this approach more important and more interested was probably the release of Quarkus that brought a good reason to provide this new approach. So let's list the minor change for a start. So, as I said in the introduction, there were deprecated parts in CDI. Most of them were deprecated in CDI 1.1. The first one, I think, I don't know if anybody ever used the @new qualifier in this room. Wow, sorry for you. So the @new qualifier was deprecated in 1.1 and was removed from the spec in CDI 4.0. So it revealed that the @new qualifier was quite useless, and you could do something similar using the @dependent scope, and you could also use the injection of the instance bin, giving you the possibility to at runtime dynamically instantiate a new instance for a given bin. Bin is new label. I don't think I used that I never used this feature. Was a way to make sure that to say by true or false if your bin could create an instance that could be null. And I think in the spec it's not very clear, but it's not something that we'd like to see, and it was deprecated very early in the spec and was removed with 4.0. Part that were deprecated with more, argument and discussion. The first one is the fire event in the bin manager. So this version of the fire event wasn't very useful because it didn't take into account the asynchronous aspect of the event that was introduced in 2.0, first of all. And it wasn't very strong typed oriented. So we introduced in CDI 2.0 a get event method. I think it was in 2.0. And the get event method allowed you to fire an event in a synchronous way or asynchronous way. And it was a better way to do that. And same for this very advanced but very useful method in the bin manager, the create injection target that helps you to develop very advanced feature and very advanced portable extension that was replaced by the get injection target that allowed you to create this injection target later with more parameters and stuff like that. So except for the two first features that were not very used if we were looking at all the framework using CDI, the two big deprecations that were done in 4.0 have replacement, and not very complicated replacement. You replace one call by two calls. Okay, but it gives you more, how to say, more control of what you are doing, having event fire asynchronously, for instance, or having an injection target with more information regarding the type. Another change that was introduced with 4.0 was the discovery mode of CDI. The discovery mode of CDI is probably one of the worst design feature in the spec, because it was not very clear when CDI 1.0 was released. The beans.xml would help you to provide a way to define the way the beans are discovered in the deployment. By default, it was all class that would have been scanned to see if they were eligible for becoming a bean. I won't list here all the conditions, but roughly, if your class wasn't abstract, wasn't final, and hadn't private constructor, stuff like that, it became a bean. But all the class paths were scanned. In CDI 1.1, we said, okay, let's stop that because it could be very cumbersome to have all the class paths scanned by the CDI runtime. So we added this annotated mode, saying that, okay, there are some annotation that could make a class eligible to become a bean. So we listed those annotations. There was some error around that because some of these annotations were also part of the @inject specification. So there was some issue with a Spring application deployed in a certain Java EE container. So there were corrections in CDI 1.2. And today, before 4.0, just before, we had a very strange behavior. If you haven't a bin.xml in your deployment, all the classes are scanned and all the eligible class become a bin. But if you provide a bins.xml with no version in the XML file, it's the same. But if you provide a bins.xml, it becomes an annotated deployment. So you really have a very confused way of discovering bin in CDI. So now, with CDI 4, so we are breaking a bit the retrocompatibility, but now it's decided that the default bin discovery mode is annotated. Okay, so we won't scan all the class path on all the class. And the last minor feature that was added to CDI 4.0 was the support of the modularity that was introduced in Java 9. So we have a Java 9 support in CDI at last. So we have two modules in CDI 4.0. The Jakarta CDI module. So it's all the CDI API, the standard API that you know. And the new module, the Jakarta CDI long model module, which define the new metadata language model that is used in CDI Lite. and I will talk about it just in a few minutes. So enough with those minor changes. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. It's a small elephant. It's like a mouse. It's light. It's CDI Lite. Anybody in this room had the test with CDI Lite? Try to do something? Not yet? Oh, okay. You can play with it. I think it's Weld 5. That is the default implementation or reference implementation of CDI that provides this Lite support. So why did we thought about this CDI Lite feature? As I said in my introduction, the idea was to provide lighter CDI footprints. So if you followed all the history of G2 EE and Java EE history, it was very often said that Java EE containers were slow, etc., etc. It was true at once. It was false from the from Java E5, Java E6, but it was too late. And we also had some critics around CDI and the fact that it was an heavy specification, providing a lot of stuff. And it's one of the reasons why there was this, this split during Java E6 and the creation of the at-inject specification. It was the reason that the main reason was that CDI was a bit too fat regarding the feature, and the implementation would be too big and too slow. Okay, so CDI Lite, the idea is to reduce the footprint of the implementation. Less CPU, less memory, and smaller runtime size, smaller deployment. So first, the idea was to be able to run in a constrained environment, mobile, stuff like that. But lately, it was also an idea of being able to deploy in the cloud. Okay, so this idea of cloud ready and cloud native was one of the intention between CDI Lite. So the idea is to provide a CDI subset, the biggest CDI subset, able to give you all the magic you have in CDI. So the beans, dependency injection, events, some of the interceptor feature, extension, it was an important point, to provide it at build time. So it was a big challenge. That the idea is to be able to use those new AOT JVM and compiler like GraalVM, but this is the main target here, to provide a way to have all the specific feature added by the framework done at build time. So the first target and the first big implementation of framework using this CDI Lite feature will be probably Quarkus and Micronaut. Micronaut joined us in during the CDI 4.0 specification. So we had a lot of nice discussion with Graham regarding how to have this CDI Lite feature valid for Weld and ArcDI, which is the hidden implementation, hidden CDI implementation in Quarkus, and Micronaut as well, which is a good thing because we avoided to have to have a specification designed only for Quarkus. So it was also thought for Micronaut, and we also have some discussion with people from Eliden, even if they didn't participate to the spec. So we make sure that we didn't provide a specification that has only one implementation. Another target might be all the microprofile implementation. As you know, CDI is a cornerstone of the microprofile specification. It's one of the, I don't want to say something wrong, but I think it's 3 or 4 Jakarta EE specification in microprofile, JAX-RS, JSON P, JSON B, and CDI, I think it's 4. And so it's a very important part of the microprofile because it provides all the programming model for microprofile. So having a light way to create your microservice and being able, for instance, with Graal VM, to provide a native executable for your platform will be a killer feature for the cloud. So that's the main reason why we go for CDI Lite. So how did we do that? So there was a lot of discussion. If you go in the expert group mailing list, you will see that we weren't all. We didn't have an agreement at the start to stay politically correct. But when we start CDI 4, the spec was like that. So we had the CDI core part in the spec, the CDI for Java EC, and the CDI for Java EE. So this split was done during the CDI 2.0 specification. And we agreed doing this incredible feature. So we split CDI core in 2 parts, CDI Lite and CDI Full. So when you see this slide, you see, okay, it's obvious. But there were a lot of discussion around this feature. For a long time, it was even thought as a new Jakarta EE specification. So CDI Lite may have been a new specification from outside CDI. There was also discussion about having not all the feature of CDI Lite in CDI Full. So you wouldn't have, how to say, a superset in the core. Sorry, in the core, you wouldn't have a superset of CDI Lite and CDI Full, but some specific stuff in Lite and some specific stuff in Full. That's normal that there are some specific stuff in Lite in the Full, but it would have been a pity that to have something different. So we achieved to do that. So you have Lite, which is the lighter part. You have Full, which is the superset and provide, in fact, the core. And you keep SC and EE, and you can use SC with Lite and SC with Full as well. Of course, Java EE, Jakarta EE use Full. So I start this slide by listing the things that are in CDI Lite, but it was easier to list the things that are not in CDI Lite. So as I said, the idea was to take the maximum possible from the spec in CDI Lite. So we removed some stuff, but the list is rather short. So we don't have decorators. It's not a technical limitation here, but we see that decorators are not very used. So right now, it's not part of CDI Lite. As I said in my last point, as CDI Full is a superset of CDI Lite, you could imagine later that some of these features could move from Full to Lite without changing the global spec. So it could be possible to move that in the future. Some of the more, how to say, stateful scopes are not in CDI Lite, so you don't have the session or the conversation scopes in Lite, and I think they will never be there. You don't have the specialization. Specialization implementation requires a lot of reflection. And as you know, the AOT virtual machine are not very fond of the reflection. In fact, they don't support reflection. Beans passivation. So you have a lot of feature in CDI talking about passivations of beans. So serialize your bin on disk and stuff like that. So it's not in Lite. And you don't have the standard portable extension, the one you know, for a lot of reasons, but mainly because there are a lot of stuff in portable extension that use reflection, so that's not possible in Lite. And there are a lot of stuff very advanced that need to be run at runtime and take information about the context of the execution. That's not possible as well in CDI Lite with the AOT approach. Nevertheless, we don't have the portable extension in CDI Lite, but we have a new kind of extension. So we have a build time extension. In fact, the exact name is the build compatible extension. The difference is it's compatible with an approach at build time, but you are not forced to implement it at build time. That's a small precision. You can create an implementation of CDI using this kind of extension and how to say implement them at runtime. In fact, to be honest, I think the main reason it was called like that is because implementers of CDI 4.0 cheat. So if you look at Weld, in fact, Weld doesn't provide a real build time feature. All the CDI Lite extension is done at runtime with a standard extension. But we have a proof of concept on another part, but it couldn't have been added to Weld because Weld goes into production. So you have most of the features you are using today with your portable extension. You have them in the build time extension, build compatible extension. Of course, you can use this kind of extension, as I just said, in your CDI full. So if you, let's say, if you want to develop integration of your framework, you can create it with this new kind of extension, with the build compatible extension, and it will work for CDI Lite and CDI full. What you can't do, what you cannot do, is to use both kind of extension in your development. So you have to choose. You have to say, okay, I activate this kind of extension on or this one. Okay. As I said and repeated along my presentation, we cannot do reflection in this new CDI Lite feature. So we needed a new way to provide a meta model for Java language. As you know, as you may know, if you already developed a portable extension in the past, when you develop such an extension, you are working with a meta model of the Java language, annotation, annotated type, class, etc. And a mutable one, because the one provided by the JDK is not mutable. But all this meta model is using heavily reflection. So we needed something new that is able to manipulate all those annotation stuff, class stuff, etc., before the runtime, at the compile time, so at the file class level. So that's the reason why we introduce a new metadata API with CDI Lite. So if we compare these two flavors of extension, yeah, and I didn't write it, but the portable extensions are not deprecated. They still stay there and they won't be removed. Because we have a lot of feature and lots of framework using those portable extensions, and it's not on the agenda to remove them, because I didn't say that, but you cannot do exactly the same things in this new build compatible extension and the portable extension. Portable extension stays a bit more versatile and powerful. So, if you compare the two flavors of extension, they are both service provider. So the portable extension is the service provider of the extension interface, and the build compatible extension, wow, is a service provider of a build compatible extension interface. This new kind of extension doesn't use the CDI observer feature. So if you already developed an extension or look at the code, you see that there is a lot of @observes. I don't know, process annotated type, process bin, after bin discovery, etc. We don't have those observer stuff, because when you are dealing with the extension, it's before the runtime, so we don't have the CDI container, we don't have any feature regarding the event, etc. But they keep the same approach than the portable extension. So you have the same idea of having different phases of creation of metadata in your application, but they do it in a small different way. So instead of using, sorry, instead of using those events that you saw in your portable extension, so the before bin discovery, process annotated type, after bin discovery, etc., 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 we are using annotation on method to provide roughly the same feature. So not every event in portable extension have their equivalent in CDI Lite extension. There are parts that were a bit hard to specify and implement. Perhaps in the future they will be there, but you can do a lot of stuff already with those. But if you have a need or something specific, you can go to the expert group and start a discussion on the topic. So as I said, we had to introduce a new language model to provide all the equivalent of the reflection regarding the mainly the annotation, so adding a qualifier. I will show you some extension example after that. So for instance, adding a qualifier or defining a qualifier as an interceptor or stuff like that. So it provides a way to model the Java language from a high perspective. And of course, this new Java language model doesn't replace the existing metadata language model we have in portable extension. So to give you some example of this language model, if you look at the right part of this table, you have the meta model that is used in CDI 2, 3, etc. And in CDI Lite, you have the equivalent. So the annotated interface has an annotation target. The annotated type, which is the most used, I think, meta-model class, has this class info stuff, etc., etc. So I didn't list all the list here, but you have, I think you get the point. And as you see, there are, I was wrong, there are stuff that are present in CDI Lite are not present yet in portable extension, in classical portable extension. For instance, all the meta model regarding records are in CDI Lite, but not in a portable extension in CDI full. So, an example is better than a talk. So let's take a very simple example. I have two services, my foo service and my bar service. My bar service need to have a new qualifier on the produce bin. I want to use the my qualifier and add it to the to this bin. So if you take the the code at the bottom, you see that using the @enhancement annotation and targeting the type I want to enhance, I can very easily add this annotation. So it's not really the same we have in classical portable extension, because you can have more, how to say, the items you are manipulating are more meaningful. For instance, annotation can be seen as qualifier. It's not the case here. I'm adding this annotation, and and this annotation is a qualifier. And I have the opposite on the top of this extension. So I take my foo service, which has the my qualifier applied, and I remove the qualifier on it. It should remind you how it is done in portable extension, but we can check. If we want to do the same in portable extension, we could write something like that. So with the process annotated type, you could observe this event for the given type, my foo service and my bar service. And from the process annotated type event, because it's an event, you can use the recent configurator introduced in CDI 2, so the configure annotated type. In the first place, you could remove the my qualifier on the type. So you have a predicate. And you can add a qualifier using the add and giving an instance of the interface in the second part. So you see it's not the same, but really close. Let's continue with another example. So if we want to create what is called in CDI Lite a synthetic bin, meaning a way to create how to say a producer, an instance of a given class in the bin. So you need three stuff. You need a way to create your bin. You need a way to dispose your bin if this bin is how to say getting some specific feature like a file handler or I don't know, opening a port. Or anyway, so you have to define those specific part. It's not very rocket science here. And when you have defined those, you can use them in your extension. So in a build compatible extension that use the @synthesis annotation, so saying that I'm defining a new bin, and this bin is defined like this. It's related to the myPojo classes. So the myPojo is will be the type of the bin. I can add another type if myPojo, for instance, is I don't know, an interface and one subtype in it. I can provide the parameters to create instance of the bin, as you saw. If I go back in the creation of the instance, I need some parameter, and I get a map of these parameters to create the instance. So I can provide it in the creation of the bin. And I say, okay, you can create an instance of this bin with this creator, and you can dispose an instance of this bin with this disposer. So this code here is executed at build time, but the code we just saw here will be executed at runtime. You see, it could bring some a trick in your development. Okay, so I could have gone a bit longer on other example, etc. But I think you get it. So you have all the documentation on the CDI GitHub page in the Jakarta EE section, organization on GitHub. Here are some wrap-up around about CDI 4. So, as I said, it was just released with Jakarta EE 10. It will be added to MicroProfile next year, probably. It's not yet decided, but probably you'll have it next year in another spec, not only Jakarta EE. Quarkus will probably, and it's not official, but will probably adopt it with Quarkus 3. So it will be next year, I think, as well. So as you may know, Quarkus is using an internal implementation of CDI called ArcDI, and ArcDI will implement CDI 4. When it will be done, there will be an effort, I think, to port some of the proprietary extension to CDI build compatible extension to make it clean, but it's not yet decided or discussed. And I discussed with Graham that said that Micronaut will implement the spec next year, probably. So we'll have all the new application server implementing Jakarta EE 10 supporting CDI 4. But there will be Quarkus, there will be Micronaut, and probably other MicroProfile implementation, because I think it's a game changer to have this new way of having very light deployment for your microservice. So MicroProfile is a very MicroProfile is a, sorry, MicroProfile is a favorite target for this feature. Okay, so that's all for me. We have 1 minute left. Do we have questions? Wow. So thank you.